You guys, we have a little bit more Caro-Kann advanced variation content coming at you. This comes from the Chess Goals Caro-Kann course, and we're going to look at move 5 deviations for white. So this is the advanced variation, most popular line. We recommend c5, immediately attacking this pawn on d4, and c3 is the most common move at the club level. This is chapter 1 from our Caro-Kann course. Knight c6, and we're going to look at a couple different moves here. We're going to look at pawn to f4, which we've seen in another video, pawn to h3, bishop to e3, and bishop to e2. So usually here you'll see knight to f3. Almost everyone plays knight f3. Let's look at these sidelines though. And these came from my blitz game, so I was kind of compiling all my takeaways from my blitz games in these lines, putting them together into files. So 5, pawn to f4. Here we recommend to take. Pawn takes back. Now bishop to f5. And the idea is we want this pawn on d4 to become a really big weakness for white. It's already the weakest pawn on the board. C pawn and E pawn are not available to defend it. After knight f3, we play e6, knight c3. Now rook to c8, bringing some additional pressure down the c file. We already see the bishop eyeing c2. Bishop to d3, most common move. And here white is looking to take. So our recommendation is knight to h6. And after knight h6, the idea is if the bishop takes on f5, knight takes on f5, there's a lot of pressure coming on this d4 pawn. Black has a nice advantage already. So after knight h6, castle for white, most common move. Here we're recommending bishop to e7, getting developed, getting ready to castle. And after a3, bishop to g4. And the idea with bishop to g4 here, even though we already moved the bishop once, we're pinning the f3 knight, and we're highlighting this weakness, the pawn on d4. So with our Caro-Kann course, we always play for the initiative. That's what we're doing here. And it's hard to find a good sequence for white because our knight's coming to f5 next, ready to put another attacker on this pawn. So let's say bishop to e3 is played, for example. Here you could throw in knight f5. And white really doesn't want to go for this trade because now we have the bishop pair. We're going to castle. We're probably going to play f6. And we have a nice advantage right out of the opening. We're only 13 moves in. So that's the recommendation in this f4 line. Let's go back and let's look at 5 bishop to e3. Recommendation here is knight h6. And in the course we look at a line where white moves the knight out. We play a quick knight f5 and go after this bishop on e3. We target that early bishop move. But what happens if bishop takes h6? And I've received this question before. It gives us double pawns. It looks kind of ugly. Why do we want to allow that? This happened to me in a game. But look at what white runs into. Pawn to f4. Here I played queen to b6. Double attack on the b2 pawn and a triple attack on the d4 pawn. We have pawn, knight, and queen all attacking d4. Queen d2. Take d4. So here white really doesn't want to take back because then we just cleanly win the pawn. So it's best for white to try to develop, sacrificing a pawn. Here we can play e6, bishop d7, comfortable position. White has no compensation for the pawn. We're actually in a better position in addition to having the extra pawn. We have the bishop pair. We have rook g8 coming. We have our queen cutting across, exposed king, other open file for the other rook. Everything's in our favor here. So that 5 bishop e3 and snatching the knight on h6, not the best idea for white. Okay, let's look at 5 bishop e2. This happened to me twice recently, and it's an annoying move. The reason it's annoying is because usually after the knight comes to f3, we trade on d4 and play bishop g4. Well, now there's no bishop g4 because their bishop is guarding that square. So I did a little bit of research, and it's a strong move for white, bishop e2. The move that I recommend that we play against this is pawn to a6. A subtle move, but the idea is we're waiting for knight f3, and then we'll bring out our bishop to g4. I was looking at a line with bishop f5, but then after the knight comes to f3, usually we end up moving the bishop again to g4. So I figured, why move that bishop twice if we can make a potentially useful move with a6 and bring our bishop out in one go to the g4 square. So knight f3. And now we kind of play with the standard plan in the course. Trade on d4, bishop g4, e6, knight e7. So our knight's coming here, applying pressure to the weakest pawn on the board. H3. Whenever we see H3 in these lines, we take, and then we play for pressure on D4. So a quick queen B6, hitting D4 twice, hitting B2 once, knight E2, trying to be solid and hold this pawn. Now we play knight F5. We have 3 attackers on the weakest pawn on the board. Bishop E3. Here you have to be a little bit careful. We're not ready to play queen takes B2 because rook B1 is getting some quick counterplay, so I don't recommend that. But here we can play pawn to G6. Nice and solid. And if white plays B3, for example, trying to defend that pawn, now we could take on E3 and play bishop H6, bringing that last piece into the game. He was having trouble finding a good diagonal. Now he's found it. And this is already a slight advantage for black. We're going to play moves like rook C8, castle, and pawn to F6, chipping away at this pawn center. So nice advantage for us after 5 bishop to E2 as well. So we looked at 5 bishop E3, we looked at 5 bishop E2, we looked at 5 F4. Now let's look at 5 H3. It's another way to try to get rid of our bishop to G4 move, our typical plan. So here we can play C takes D4, C takes D4, and now I recommend bishop to F5, putting the bishop on its next best square. So G4 is unavailable. We'll stick him on F5, knowing that he's never getting to G4 anyways. After knight F3, standard plan, bishop D3. This is what I faced in a blitz game. And there's a cool idea here that I didn't find during the game, but now that I've seen it, hopefully I'll remember this. Bishop to E4. This is interesting. The idea is instead of having our bishop on G3, ready to take and win the D pawn, we use the E4 square preparing to take and win the D4 pawn. So put this in your memory bank. Remember this as an option to put pressure on F3 and win D4. This bishop E4 idea. Bishop to E3 played. Bishop to B4 check. Then we bring our knight into the game. And after castle, at this point we can make a couple trades and create a new weakest pawn on the board for white. So currently D4 is the weakest pawn. We can take and take here. And white has the option. Keep this as the weakest pawn. Or I think the stronger move is B takes, creating a new weakest pawn. This pawn on C3. And now I recommend rook to C8, lining up with this guy. And we're looking at moves like queen D7, castle, knight A5, block the C pawn. And that's going to be the weakness for the rest of the game. So I'm going to put a link in the description for our Caro-Kann Quick Start course. It's a free version. It's 10 lines. Free version of our full Caro-Kann course. So check that out. And hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you're not a subscriber. We have a lot of instructive content, and we kind of base a lot of our content on the same openings and repertoires too, so you can keep expanding your knowledge in those systems. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.